Well, hello and welcome to Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. My name is Brian Perez, and we are back live in the studio. We weren't live yesterday, but we're here today, and nothing happened with the hurricane here in Southern California, so the studios are still intact. Thank you, Lord. And I don't think any studios were affected that I know of. But anyway, we're here, and we'd love to chat with you at 888-564-6173, 888-564-6173. That number is good until 4 p.m. Pacific time. You can also send us your questions using Facebook Messenger or Instagram, or by using the form on the Pastor's Perspective page of our flagship radio station's website, KWVE.com, KWAVE.com. Go there, find the Pastor's Perspective page, and submit your question. You can also watch archives of the program there and short features that we put together every now and then. So check that out. But if you've got a question, the best way to get an answer is to call us. So call us, 888-564-6173. We're anticipating so many people calling today that we've got 2 call screeners out there ready to talk to you at 888-564-6173. And answering your questions today, we've got Richard Cimino, one of the assistant pastors at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California. And he's sitting in for Brian Broderson today. Although, Richard, I spoke with somebody who called in earlier to the radio station. His name is John. And he said that you need to say Cimino because you're Italian. He's Italian. So he was like, tell him to stop saying Cimino. Tell him to say it the right way, which is Cimino.
It is the right way. It is the correct way, yes.
Yes. But we also talked about Perez should probably be Perez. But I've been saying Perez for years, so, you know, we just...
It's for the sake of the rest of the American-speaking people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also in the studio, Bobby Conway, the pastor of Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, the guy you see on the Christianity Still Makes Sense YouTube channel. He is here with us today and tomorrow and Thursday.
That's right.
And maybe we'll get him to come back Friday and next week, and who knows? So as long as he wants to stay, it's fine with me. How are you, Bobby?
Doing good. It's nice to be with you guys here in sunny Southern California.
We're glad you were here this past weekend because you helped us get through the hurricane. Since you guys are so used to that in North Carolina, that you got here and you helped save the day.
I likened the storm here to, the snowstorms that were warned against, that everybody goes and clears out the stores and nothing really happens. And so you're thankful for that. Boy, I could care less if I ever saw another drop of snow, or rain.
How was the conference this past weekend?
We had a good time. Yeah, It was at Reliance Church in Temecula, so thank you to everybody out there who joined us. It was a lot of fun.
Great. Yep. All right, call us up. 888-564-6173 is the number. That's 888-564-6173. Now, before we get to the phone calls, let's take at least one question that was sent in on Instagram. This one is from Robert in Riverside, California. Do Christians have to still follow Jewish traditions and law? Not because of salvation, but just to please God. Where can I find reference in the Bible about this? What do you say, Bobby?
Well, we're not saved by trying to keep the law. We know that the new covenant obviously teaches us that the old covenant served as a tutor to make us aware of our sin and need of grace. And so even in the book of Galatians, we can see that they were falling back, oh, foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you, right? That you've returned to your foolish ways. That is, in trying to leverage the old covenant to perform their salvation. So we're not to keep the law to perform our salvation, but we are to practice what we see in the law as it relates to our sanctification. But that's not all of the law, because some of the law is no longer effective as it relates to the dietary law. And you think about, what took place with the sacrificial system. And then in AD 70, when Rome sacked Jerusalem, destroying the temple, bringing an end to the sacrificial system in that way. So you have kind of that dietary law, the ceremonial law, but all that has been kind of canceled out. And even Jesus reiterates that statement in Acts 10 to Peter, don't call unclean what I've called clean, rise, kill, and eat. And so I would say it's important that we realize that becoming a Christian doesn't mean that all the things that the Old Testament talks about that we don't have to pay attention to anymore. But it does mean that some of the things the Old Testament talks about we're not living by, but rather we're remembering that God used a particular pattern and system of things, albeit some of that's not in place anymore. We still recognize the theological intent behind it, and therefore it informs us theologically, and that's how it serves us practically.
Yeah, that's so concise, Bobby. I really appreciate that. And I think, too, we think there were dietary laws that, you think about this, Paul's writing to the Colossians, and he says to them, therefore, don't let anyone judge you in regard to food and drink, or in the matter of a festival or a new moon or a Sabbath day. These are a shadow of what was to come. The substance is Christ. And you think of the believers in Colossae, like they didn't know anything about Jewish law. They were full pagan Gentiles outside of the descendants of Abraham. And yet all who come to faith in Jesus, whether they're descendants of Abraham or whether they're Gentiles, they're still, Jesus wants us to obey him. Jesus wants us to follow him. And then there's the moral code that I think is very important to us, like the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments. Like those aren't disposed of. And surely now out of a heart, like you're saying, it's out of a heart for love for Jesus. Like, if I'm going to follow Jesus, I want to obey Jesus. And that's not legalism, and that's not religiosity. That's like love.
Very good.
Now, that reminds me that our friends down at Maranatha Chapel in San Diego are doing something next month, September 17th. It's called the Feast of Trumpets. They're going to put together a Feast of Trumpets. It's on September 17th. Again, not something that's mandatory for salvation or anything, but maybe if you just wanted to see what it was like to participate in something like that, you might want to check that out at maranathachapel.org. All right, one more from Facebook. And Robert, thank you for sending in that question online. But Catherine sent in this one, actually two questions. I'm reading in Exodus where God sends the plagues. And so far with the blood and the frogs, it says, but the magicians were able to do the same things with their magic. How were the magicians able to do the same miracles that God was doing? Bobby?
I think that the best understanding that we can come up with here would be that the evil one's behind this. And so the enemy is obviously a masquerader of truth. He covers it all up. And so I think that the evil one has some power, obviously, even though he's in a fallen state. The power is retained, and he's the God of this world, and he's at work as the God of this world. And behind some of these things that, look miraculous is the evil one at work.
Very good. And Catherine's other question, which actually she sent in a while ago, so hopefully she got the answer to this question at some point, but maybe it would be something good to talk about. Catherine says, I have the opportunity to share a book with someone close to me who's very firmly an atheist. He is an extremely intelligent guy, and so I wanted to ask your opinion of what book I should suggest to him. And he seems a hopeless case, but I know there's never a hopeless case, and this opportunity has presented itself. So again, Catherine sent this in long ago, so hopefully she's already found this book that someone recommended to her, anybody, which is why we also say to call in with your questions. A better chance you'll get an answer that way. But any suggestions for Catherine, guys?
Well, I think there's probably still plenty of people asking that question.
Sure.
So
That
it'd be
too.
really, really
Yep.
valid today. Yeah. I'll defer to Bobby first. You go. Because you're an apologist, so give your A list.
Well, it depends, I guess, on really how academically astute this individual is. And a lot of times atheists, they get credit for, being brilliant on things when sometimes that's just not the case.
Yeah.
And not to say that there's not really sharp atheists, there are, but sometimes just because somebody's an atheist, they get that reputation, and that's not always the case. So if this person's reputation exceeds them and they're genuinely, intellectually ready for something like William Lane Craig's Reasonable Faith, that's what I would suggest, because that will confront this individual right from the get-go with arguments for the existence of God. In other words, Craig will go at his atheism right from the beginning and challenge it, and then move from his atheism to a theistic version of God, and then moving more toward the reliability of the scriptures and the resurrection of Jesus, the trustworthiness of miracles. If that person is not a trained philosopher, then I think they could read Timothy Keller's The Reason for God.
I have that one down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any others?
I'm thinking, like, especially for people who are coming, their atheism is more entrenched in, like, what's happening in culture. How has culture been seeing Christianity? How have they misrepresented Christianity? And the way people have truly misunderstood Christianity is Confronting Christianity by Rebecca McLaughlin. She's got, like, it's just based on a number of questions that, like, the attacks against Christianity, like they're saying this, and this. How do we answer those specific things? And they really, really do run along a lot of the cultural opposition to the gospel, which is so common, and people are wondering, how do I answer those questions? So
good point.
So that was Confronting Christianity by Rebecca McLaughlin. And what were the two books you mentioned? You mentioned William Lane Craig.
Yeah, that would be Reasonable Faith. And then the other one was The Reason for God by Timothy Keller. And while we're at it, we should probably throw out Justin Brierley's upcoming book, because he has seen really a demise amongst the new atheists in particular. And his new book comes out in September, so it's just a few weeks away. And I think that would be really helpful for people to check out his book on the surprising rebirth of belief in God.
Yes, and you can find out more about that book. We had Justin on the program a few weeks ago. In fact, you could find that on our archives on Facebook and YouTube and Spotify. But Justin's book, as Bobby said, The Surprising Rebirth of Belief in God. And you can pre-order that right now at justinbrierley.com, Justin. Brierley, it's actually Briley is how you say it, but it's spelled Brierley, Brierley. Yeah.
Chimino, Briar.
Yes. So check that out online. All right, to the phones we go. 888-564-6173 is the number, 888-564-6173. Here is Lydia in Newport Beach, California. Welcome, Lydia, to Pastor's Perspective.
Thank you. I had a question about the form of meditation called sound bath. I'm not familiar with that, and wanted to ask the pastors what, is taking a sound bath in a form of meditation biblical?
Sound bath. Bobby?
Well, I mean, unless you turn the shower off, you're going to hear the sound of the water flowing. So fill the tub up first. But all that to say, I'm not familiar with sound bath. I did see on the board that you asked something about, is praying or meditating with crystals appropriate. If it has something to do with crystals, I would just say, let's just think about that for a moment. These are crystals. Why do they get special privilege to join us in our meditative exercises? Why not rocks? Why not leaves? Well, some would say tea leaves are good, but why these different items that we would include? So, for example, if I'm going to leverage crystals in my meditation, and I want the crystals to do something about it, then it would seem to reason that the crystals would need to know that I want them to do something about my plight. But the crystals are non-rational beings, right? They're not beings at all. They're just inanimate objects. So you take inanimate objects like tea leaves and crystals, and then we go into meditation, and then we leave thinking that we've been informed by a leaf or by a crystal with a certain intel for how to shape our life. We need to really think about how absurd that is. I mean, we would be much better off having a dog join us in our meditative exercises, because the dog would know our needs a lot more than crystals would. So all that to say, when you just stop and think, well, what can these crystals do for me? And you think about them and you go, well, they're crystals. So if we're thinking that they're going to do something for us as it relates to life direction, comfort, assuaging angst, all those types of things, that's where we've really lost a sense of proper placement on the priority of things.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like how how cults, they co-opt truth to do their thing. Because I just really quickly just typed in meditate on my laptop here, and and Isaac went out to meditate in the field towards evening. Wow, what a great thing to do. Like, just, I need to go out and sit and think with God. Or Joshua, this book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night. Of course, Psalm 1, that epic, blessed is that man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the way of the sinners, neither does he sit in the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the instruction of the Lord, and in it he meditates day and night. The idea of, like, I remember Pastor Chuck used to say, it's like, cows chewing the cud. They chew it, they take it in, they bring it back up, they chew it some more to just milk out every bit of nutrition from it. It's like, what a great practice for our lives. But then these other groups come alongside, and it's like, no, you need crystals to do this. And they're going to really help you get to the truth. And I just think it's so beautiful that God would ask us to think about him. David would say, I lay on my bed at night and think of you. What a great practice.
Yeah, I mean, you just think about kind of the absurdity of that too. Like, I just picture God looking down while we're, playing with our crystals, and him thinking, like, do we really think this is going to get us somewhere? Yeah. But it can just all sound so spiritual, but it doesn't have any spiritual power to do anything for us.
Lydia, the reason you asked this question, is this something you've been thinking of doing, or someone who's doing it, or what?
Actually, not because I was thinking of doing that, but I was invited. One of my friends has a small business, and she has a meditation room, and she's like, oh, well, you're into meditation, and this is something that could benefit you, and taking a sound bath. And the sound bath got me curious because, she made she was, I don't know how to describe it, but there are these different pots, glass pots, different sizes, and they make a different sound. And she says some of them are more soothing and some of them are deep, and they sing. What really got me curious was when I saw her cafe, and there's all these crystals and minerals, and that's what really got my, the yellow flag threw out, if you will. And that's when I thought, sound bath, is this all like one big, is this part of her small business, and is it biblical? Because, the sound bath itself, if we went out to a park and we're just listening to the sound and being quiet, and that's, I wouldn't even say that's biblical or anti-biblical. It's just kind of maybe going out in a park. But, I think what really gave me comfort was meditating on God's word, and that's really what I do. So maybe that's an opportunity for me to explain to my friend with the small business that my form of meditation is meditating with me and Jesus and his word. And that's really what I do in my quiet time. And sometimes it's not even meditating on a verse. It's just, I just want to hang out with Jesus, play worship songs, make coffee, and journal, or maybe write a long praise report, or, a thankful praise of what's going to happen. But yeah, that's actually how this all came up, was just the crystals I saw in her business.
Right. I'm thinking you can also just listen to archives of Pastor's Perspective, and then, that there's the sound, and I don't know. Christianity Still Makes Sense. Lots of YouTube channels that you can watch them, so it's not really a sound bath, but I guess you can just close your eyes and listen to them, and then it kind of be like that.
It's kind of funny, though, to picture like me telling my wife, hey, honey, I'm going to be stepping aside for about 15, 20 minutes for a sound bath. So if you could please just let me be. Oh, sweetie, I forgot the crystals, though. If you could bring those in, that would accompany me. That would be great.
Right.
It is kind of an interesting thought that we can arrive at, no doubt. But Lydia, that's a great question. And, people mean well. We don't really stop and just take this stuff and think about it. So you're presented with stuff like, hey, let's just get together and meditate around crystals, and everybody bring your favorite color rocks, and we show up, and it all seems cute and innocent and sweet. But like the elephant in the room question is, what are these rocks going to do for us?
Yeah, the inanimate.
Yeah.
The idea that sound and that the little article that you just popped up, Brian, talked about healing instruments. Like, here's this inanimate object, but it has this capacity to deliver something. And I mean, I just thinking about it, like there's reality, like sonic therapy on joints and muscles and all that stuff. Yeah, there's a dynamic energy that's released. It does stuff for your muscle tissues. But if you're talking about the soul, there's nothing that can reach the soul in truth.
That's good.
So it's a big deal.
Yeah,
it's this whole thing, like the inanimate universe has everything. We just have to tap into it, whether it's by sound or whether it's by light that's diffracted through crystals. It's just, no, how about just turning to the maker of the universe and let him do it? So
yeah, we got to get beyond the universe, as you said, to the maker of the universe. I'm reading again through Augustine's Confessions, and Saint Augustine, was a great mind. And in his Confessions, he's sort of just giving you his trajectory toward salvation. He was raised by a very devout mother, Monica, who shed many tears praying for her son, Augustine, to really give his life to Christ. And he would end up going to Milan and meeting the bishop there, Ambrose, and giving his life to Christ. But his trajectory of sharing was the journey that he went on into botched promiscuity that he lived with, and then shifting over into Manichaeism as a form of belief, and then picking up some of the Neoplatonic thinking, and then arriving at Christ and Christianity. And what you can see in his journey is he was wanting to embody God. And so he was looking to tap into a divine being that was within the universe. And so thinking and believing that, God would have extension like we would, as corporeal beings that are made of matter and obviously soul as well. That said, he had to let that thought die that God was a part of the world or had extension, and in letting that die, realizing that God had to be outside of the world, that God is the uncorrupted one, that God, in being supreme, what makes him supreme is he's the great I am, that he's timeless. And so when we're dealing with crystals, what we're doing is we're looking to find our meaning and our purpose and our direction from the world instead of the one who made it.
Now, getting back to the topic of meditation, sometimes we get asked about yoga. Is it okay for Christians to do yoga? And there's people who are adamantly against it, and why do you even have to call it yoga? Why can't you just call it stretching or, something along those lines? But what do you say about that?
I don't have a problem with breathing and trying to be present, but if you just take yoga and apply it the way it was meant to be applied, the kind of meditation would be a mind emptying process versus a filling process. And as we meditate as Christians, we're meditating on something, the Word of God. When a person who is engaged in Eastern yoga and meditation, according to the way that it was set up, you're not meditating on something, you're striving to meditate on nothing. Or just your breath and saying, your certain ohms or whatever. So I would say that it's important that we realize that breathing can play a massive role. Like when I'm feeling anxious, deep breathing exercises can relax us. I have nothing against breathing and stretching. I just don't think we need to call it yoga.
Yeah, I'm good.
I have nothing against breathing either. I mean, it's something you have
that's how you live. So.
Yeah, something like that.
All right, Lydia, thank you for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. 888-564-6173 is the number to call between now and 4 p.m. Pacific time. That's 888-564-6173. Bobby Conway is here in the studio to answer your questions. So is Richard Cimino, a.k.a. Cimino. 888-564-6173 is the number to call. Here's another one that was sent in on Facebook, this one from Britt in Torrance, California. My question is about Jacob when he wrestled the angel and the angel was overcome. Sorry, I'm breaking into my inner Bono. Is this referring to a physical altercation or a picture of Jacob arguing or reasoning with God? Bobby?
So one of the things that I like to share with our listeners is whenever a question is posed in the way that that question was posed, it's a potential false dilemma. Either A or B, right? Not A, not B. Okay, so it might not be A, it might not be B. It might be A or B. But to say it's either A or B, we need to start asking the question, well, is it C or D? In this particular instance, was Jacob wrestling physically with the angel of the Lord, or was there something spiritual going on? And I think we could not put ourselves into the dilemma and say, oh, it was A, or no, excuse me, on the other hand, it was B, but I think you could say, well, it was A and B. Okay, so therefore C. And I think when we consider this situation, that's what happened. God manifests himself in the angel of the Lord. There was a physical altercation, and it ended with a spiritual surrender.
Yep. Great. And then also the reality says the Lord touched his socket.
Yes.
Right? So there was something that was happening that affected him in a physical way because he would leave there limping. Right?
Yes.
So I think, but the beautiful thing is that he just found out his real wrestling match has been with God all along, and he finally had the moment where God had to say, "Look, let's just get this head on."
Yes, and I think that kind of question that was asked can be helpful for us to think about that, because take that question and you can see how people ask us questions like, well, does God exist or does God not exist? Okay, well, he either exists or he doesn't, A or B, right? He can't exist and not exist. So I think we then, if you're asked a question about, how did the universe get here? Well, then you're put in a position where you stop and you think. And that's a question you go, we should ask that, right? Like if you're alive and we're living, like, what are the options? So the options would be that the universe eternally existed. Well, according to modern day cosmology, we know that answer is not going to hold water because of the expansion of the universe. That shows us that if you were to rewind that process, you would come back to a singularity where you have the Big Bang. Not only that, you have basically the second law of thermodynamics, that the universe is running out of usable energy. So therefore, it can't go on, or it couldn't have went on infinitely. So that said, I think that there's arguments that we can leverage to say that the universe is not eternal, like the way Aristotle would have thought of it in the ancient world. Others would say that the universe is an illusion. Take Buddhists, for example. But that's not livable. I mean, we don't really live like it's an illusion. We believe there's a real external world to us. Even the fact that I'm in the world, I'm part of the world, so am I an illusion as well? So is everything out there an illusion, but then I'm the concrete property? Or am I also an illusion because people are perceiving me? So when I perceive them, am I perceiving an illusion? And when they perceive me, are they perceiving an illusion? So you can begin to see that worldview is not real strong, right? Or another option would be that it popped into being out of nothing. That would be the shift that modern-day atheists are having to turn to and have had to turn to a while because of the understanding of modern-day cosmology with the universe having a beginning. So if it had a beginning, then what did it emerge out of? Well, they don't have anything that it emerged out of, so it emerged out of nothing. Well, then you start thinking about the fact that this is presented to us as modern-day intelligentsia. It seems absurd because you get no thing from nothing. So what are our options? The universe eternally existed? Well, we said that can't work. According to modern-day cosmology, the universe is an illusion? Well, that's really problematic because we don't live like that. And am I an illusion? Or the universe popped into being out of nothing? Well, that just seems really weird. Okay, well then multiple gods created it, and they all work together in doing this. Well, I don't know what worldview aspires to doing that, because it does seem like there has to be one God that would be the ultimate God, because you can't have multiple gods with all the same exact attributes that eternally existed. So there has to be one God who's an uncaused, beginningless beginner of all things created, and therefore the explanation of the universe comes from a theistic God who we believe is the Christian God.
Very good. We are going to take a break here on Pastor's Perspective. Give us a call, grab an open line, talk to Richard Cimino and Bobby Conway. Bobby is here in the studio with us, or is he? Maybe he's not here. I don't know. Is that maybe? I don't know. Might be an illusion. I don't know. But give us a call, 888-564-6173, 888-564-6173. We're here till 4 p.m. Pacific time. Grab an open line, 888-564-6173. We're back on Pastor's Perspective. What do you guys want to talk about? 888-564-6173 is the number. 888-564-6173. Brian Perez here till 4 p.m. along with these two guys, Bobby Conway and Richard Cimino. Bobby's the pastor of Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, visiting Southern California this week. We're so grateful for that. And you can also see Bobby's YouTube videos on Christianity Still Makes Sense. So check that out, subscribe to it, like it, all that other stuff so that you can get notified every time Bobby puts out a new video. Also in the studio, Richard Cimino, one of the assistant pastors at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, sitting in for Pastor Brian Broderson, who should be back in a few weeks. And Richard taught this past Sunday at Calvary Costa Mesa. How'd it go, Richard?
I always tell my wife, I'm not the best judge of that. You tell me how it went.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know?
So let's ask Valerie. Let's call her. Tell her
Right
what
now.
she thought.
Yep.
Yes. All right. 888-564-6173. And here is Wayne calling from your Belinda, California. Not my Belinda, but your Belinda. Hello, Wayne. Welcome.
The land of gracious living.
Yes, that's what I hear.
My question is there sin in heaven? I was having a conversation with my older brother who's on the fence. He believes in Jesus, but he doesn't believe that Jesus is who he says he is. He just thinks he's a good teacher and such. But we were getting into this discussion about the Bible over this past weekend, and it was a really good conversation. I had him thinking about a lot of things, and then he asked me this question, and I had no answer because he said when the devil was in heaven, he sinned and he got cast out, but I thought there was no sin in heaven. That's what he said to me. I said, wow, I can't answer that. I'll have to get back to you. So I'm calling the smartest people I know, Bobby.
Oh, jeez.
Go for it, Bobby.
Well, thank you for your call, Wayne. I think your brother's correct on one idea and incorrect on another. Incorrect as it relates to who Jesus is, but correct that sin did enter into heaven. Sin can enter heaven, but it can't remain in heaven. When it enters heaven, it gets cast out of heaven. So obviously, with Satan having his fall in heaven, sin would have entered there, and therefore he was cast out. But then in the book of Job, it seems like he still has access to heaven, and even the things that he would be discussing with God in accessing God would be sin as well, because what he was wanting to do to Job was to cause Job to sin. So I would say it can enter heaven, but it can't remain in heaven, and it won't even be able to enter our final heaven. So this is just something that is happening on the stage of this temporary human experience that we're having. As it relates to Jesus and being a good person, as C.S. Lewis said, we need to give up on all this talk of him being a good person. He didn't leave that option open to us. And besides, the person who says the kind of things that Jesus did could not go down as merely a good teacher, right? Mm-hmm. And then he would go on to say he's either liar, Lord, or lunatic. So the fact that Jesus can gain a reputation as a good person, think about the claims that Jesus was saying. He claimed to forgive sins. He went about healing people. He claimed to be God in the flesh, claiming to be one with the Father, claiming to be before Abraham, showing that he believed that he was eternal. This kind of stuff right here, if Jesus was just a good person, yet claiming to be God, would we say that somebody's a good person today that's walking around claiming to be God? Right. We would say this person's incredibly delusional. Yeah. This person is a megalomaniac. How in the world could this person think that they're God? This person's self-righteous. They're saying that they can forgive sins. This person is delusional. They're saying that they're coming again. This person, has a victim mentality. He's claiming that he's going to suffer and die. So all that to say, when people go about saying that Jesus is a good person, we need to say, no, the person that Jesus was and said the kind of things that he said wouldn't be a good person. He's either God, or he would have been lying, or completely a lunatic, or a legend. Obviously, legend's not going to work because we have all kinds of historical detail that shows that he was alive. To say that he was a lunatic, that doesn't seem like a good handle on things. To say that he is a liar, for somebody who was describing himself as the truth and spent so much time calling out lies and walking in the truth, to claim that he's a liar. So I don't feel like the options that are presented to us are worth taking up, except for the one that he gave us when he said, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God."
We mentioned some books at the beginning of the program. Would any of those be good recommendations for Wayne's friend, you think?
The books at the beginning would not be related to this, no. Okay.
But are there any books that maybe for somebody who's thinking?
I think that we could get into discussions around the problem of evil. If somebody wanted to look into that kind of a topic where that might come up, but for that particular question, I don't know of a book that will exhaust that question. I probably have done stuff even on the 1 Minute Apologist with that question in mind as well.
Yeah. All right. Wayne, thanks for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. Now we're going to go out to Virginia. Here is Steve. Welcome to the program, Steve.
Hey, thanks very much. I've got a very practical question. Our church is going through some changes, and I'd love to hear your take on biblical model for church leadership.
What kind of changes?
It's mainly a congregational-led church, and I came to it from an elder rule church. And the pastor and some of the staff is would like to make more of a change to an elder-led, not an elder-ruled, so sort of in between the congregational and an elder-ruled. And I'm part of a group of people that are kind of dealing with that and making recommendations to the congregation and trying to give them biblical reasoning why that might be a good change to do. So I'm looking for some information.
What's your position?
I love the elder ruled. The church I came from was it's just a fantastic elder rule. They were men of God. They were humble. They ruled well. I served as a deacon, and there were specific roles. We served as deacon, just serving. We didn't make any policy guidelines or anything like that. We just served the body and let the elders, the plurality of elders, guide the church and make all the management. But it's a Baptist church, and they really seem to be in favor of the congregational model. But what happens is a lot of the members aren't spiritual. They aren't really regenerate, so the decisions they make don't seem to be fully informed. And that's sort of the issue that I have with it. So when they started talking about it, I jumped all over, and I volunteered to be part of the group that would help sort of guide the conversation and leading people to that. But some backup would be helpful, or correct me if I'm absolutely wrong.
Well, I mean, there are different camps that would agree that around the idea of elders, overseers, that they're the highest office in a local church, and they have the responsibility of oversight of doctrinal soundness and the spiritual health of the church. They have pastoral care responsibilities, and then equipping believers for the work of the ministry, and I think bringing vision to that group. Now, with that said, I believe that there are churches who would say yes, but then there's elder equals pastor. And for a long time, that was the way I understood it. Elder, pastor, synonymous. Elder is the office, pastor is the task. But now there's a from the people that I know, there's a move towards saying, well, elder and pastor are not synonymous, and they're looking at the languages, and they're saying, well, in the Greek, pastor is usually a verb, pastorine. They do this work of soul care, if you would. And so you don't have to be an elder to be a pastor, but pastors are not elders. They're separate from. And then there's also the view of like, well, is it a plurality of elders that run the church, that lead the church, or is it what some people would call the Moses model? There's a guy, he's the lead pastor, and then he kind of leads a team of other pastors in the ministry. There's a lot of people that are wondering, well, which of these are the thing? I think the biggest idea, and I'm open to hear what you have to say, Bobby, that we need elders. It's clear in the New Testament. It's clear in the book of Acts. Paul said Titus, I believe, to go appoint elders. That's not done in this one place. You go there, go to Crete, and appoint elders. Had to be done. He says that's missing right now. We went, we preached the gospel, people got saved, and we've moved on, but they need people to lead that congregation. And so I think, Peter with Jesus, post-resurrection, feed my sheep, feed my lambs, tend them, the call to pastoral care. But how people perceive that office, is it divided equally amongst a group of elders? I personally, I think leading is more of a task. Senior is more of a title. I had one really bright guy, one of my seminary professors said, I would prefer lead because at least it's serving. It's a serving title, whereas senior applies just a position and above. And he goes, so if I'm going to say that, because I just felt like, I'm an assistant here now on staff, and I'm happy to be in that position, but I was the lead pastor or senior pastor at one church that I came in behind a guy that had to leave, and then another one I planted myself. And by the time I got to the second one, after pastoring for 13 years as the senior pastor, quote unquote, I essentially told my team of guys, I said, look, I just think, I planted this work, but I consider myself to be the first among equals here. I'm first in the sense that I planted it. It was a vision God gave me, but I'm the first among equals. And we just tried to operate along those lines constantly. So,
Bobby?
Yeah, those are good words, Richard. Form and function was the terms that Gene Getz, a church that I went to when I was at Dallas Seminary, he wrote a book called Sharpening the Focus of the Church, and he talked about form and function. So there are these biblical functions like community and discipleship and evangelism, and then there are forms that these functions take. So community is a biblical function, but what's the best form for community? Is it small groups? Is it Sunday school? You name it. As it relates to pastoring, you have the function of the pastor, and then I think that the form that takes is going to be, related to the people that are in the context that he's going to serve with. It's going to relate to the culture. It's going to relate to his temperament and what's the best kind of culture to create around him with his gifts. So if you have a pastor that starts a church and he's strong on catalytic visionary energy, he's going to want to probably surround himself with more administrative types. I think when it comes to building a leadership team, the first church that I planted out of was Fellowship Bible Church in Little Rock. Robert Lewis was a mentor of mine. He created the men's fraternity curriculum, and they taught me a model about community, corporation, and cause, that when you're building your leadership out, you have to be careful to balance all that. So sometimes when you think about us, we're all going to be stronger in one than the other. Community is, your relational guy. Cause is your visionary, your catalytic guy. Corporate is kind of your administrative. The body needs to be organized. You're a policymaker, so to speak. And if you just have all community people, you'll love each other well, but you might not reach people. You might be cliquey. If you're just cause, you'll wear your people out, just going after the next thing. If you're just corporate, you'll constrain the vision with policies. Mm-hmm. So you need those balances. As it relates to then the best model of leadership, I don't like congregational. I don't even think it's biblical. To Steve's point, I mean, you get immature believers, they shouldn't be voting on something. So somebody gets saved one Sunday, then the next week they're part of making a decision on who the next pastor is, and they don't even know what a pastor is. Yeah. So that's not going to be a good model. I also don't like in a church where you end up with pastors and elders, because I think that the Bible is using terms to refer to an office. So a shepherd, a pastor, an overseer, an elder, those are synonyms that you would find in a thesaurus to relate to that leader. But here's what I don't think's happening. I don't think when Paul tells Timothy to raise up elders, right, at Crete, I don't think he was saying, raise up a group of men that will come around and provide a performance review for you on an annual basis. Yeah. I don't think that they would have ever felt entitled to give Titus a performance review. Yeah. So I've had it where you've had pastors and elders in a church, but the church then, they automatically tend to think of two offices, pastors, and then inevitably you have an elder board that and you got these guys, they're working in the business world, they're doing their own jobs, they haven't been to seminary, they're doing a great job in the church, but they're working their own job, and then they come in and they can just shut down the decisions of people who've been in seminary, training, working full-time at the job, so the staff has a good sense of what to do, and they can just shut it down like that. What we have at Image is we just call them all pastors, but we have non-staff pastors. In the past church, it would have been called elders. And we went with the term pastors so that people wouldn't confuse that these are the same office. So we're all functioning the same way. Some are just non-staff and some are staff. And then you have the board of directors that can help with some of that stuff. So I like your term first among equals. I think that phrase does fit, but you can get in a situation where you're just doing unanimous voting, and I don't like that either, because then the naysayer always wins. So basically unanimous vote just means the most negative person gets to steer the ship.
Yeah, consensus is not unanimity.
Yeah.
It isn't. Neither is it majority. Yeah. Consensus, I love this one definition, and for the life of me, I can't remember the guy's name, but it was in one of our textbooks that we use for seminary, and the guy was saying consensus is not unanimous, It's not majority. It's everybody looking at one another and say, I understand you fully, and you understand me fully, but I'll go over here with you. Right? I will. There's a consensus.
Deference too.
And there's a real deference. And I know for myself, in the second church I pastored up in Northern California, there were times where like I was strongly, adamantly like not agreeing with these guys, but I'd go, okay, let's do that. And I am not that guy. By nature, you ask my wife, you ask my friends, like one of my really dear friends in life used to describe me as a bulldozer, right? Or a steamroller. Like I was just like, I have this is here, everybody get on board, we're going. But as I've matured, like the Lord kind of started to soften those edges and I really felt like I don't see this the way you guys see it, but I trust that you guys are seeing something really clearly that I'm not seeing. Mm-hmm. So I'm with you. Let's go do this thing. That's right. Consensus. It's like I just think that's so very important. And then, but there was one time, like during the 2020 thing, during COVID, during all the racial tensions, there was one time where I just said, guys, I really see this strongly, and I'm going to pull out that card. I've never used it in 18 years, but I'm taking out the card that says first on it. Someone's going to lead here. Somebody has to make a decision, and this is the decision. And it was the hardest one, and it was a rough one, to say the least. Wow. But I would never go back on that. I really wouldn't. So I just think I don't see anywhere where it says, oh, it's a plurality of elders, or no, it's this. It just says there's elders. So what you said, I think it's so great how it fits in the context that you're at.
Yeah.
Steve, thank you for your phone call today from Virginia, 888-564-6173. Now let's go to the hills of Laguna, California. Laguna Hills. Talk to Haley. What is up, Haley? Thanks for calling. 888-564-6173.
Hi. So I had like a neighbor. Last week we were in a conversation, and they kind of mentioned how they didn't want the homeless to live near them, but they were okay if the homeless got housing. And when I said, why does that make sense? They're like, oh, this type of building that would fit homeless people wouldn't fit in our neighborhood. Is that Christian to say?
Now, is your friend Christian? Does your friend consider him or herself to be a Christian?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Bobby?
Man, the homeless thing is such an issue, right? I mean, being homeless is not a good thing. And we have a problem on our hands that I wish I knew the solution to. I mean, I have a friend that, he's even mentioned like, creating an island or something, find an island and having provisions. And there was a part of me that just heard it though. And I was like, yeah, here's an island if you want to live that way and just tear up the island and defecate all over the place and have needles everywhere. This is a place that you can go. If you're shut down on life, you can't go. And then, the government is, sends provisions over. But yeah, you're just kind of living lawless out there. It sounds really ugly. It sounds really bad. But I can understand why you wouldn't want that kind of lifestyle going on in your neighborhoods. I mean, what homelessness produces, that isn't to say everybody, but in general, the homeless population is a drug-addicted community that is shut down, lots of mental health stuff, lots of sin, lots of need for Jesus, and I think that we need to figure out something. And I don't know what the solution is, but my goodness, there is a part of me, I'm thinking like if I was homeless and everybody was mad at me all the time for my begging and I just did not have the capacity to get out and work, but I knew that there was this island that was dedicated that I could go and I'm just going to be amongst other, people like this, and maybe they were going to send people out that were going to be pastors and chaplains on this island trying to help out and take care of things. I don't know, man. Something's better than just breaking in these houses and stores and defecating on the streets. We need something. I don't know what the solution is.
Yes, I totally agree, and I think with the summation of like I don't know what to do. Like
it's overwhelming.
It's overwhelming to think of the problem. Here's what we do. I think we have to, as Christians, we start with God is all the time. Like he has to be our starting point going forward. And when he makes himself known to Moses on Mount Sinai, he says, I am the Lord, Yahweh, full of compassion. That's the number one. He in biblical times, names carried character in them. And so what he says is, let me explain myself to you. First of all, I am full of compassion, right? And so we can't lose the compassion element, because it's upon us. It's incumbent upon us as followers of Yahweh incarnate to be followers of Jesus, to be compassionate. How does compassion look? Well, it doesn't look like can we just build a building for him because that's going to fix the whole problem. It would be very compassionate when there's the element that could be very, very destructive, socially destructive and threatening to safety. Well, the compassion has to move in two directions. It can't be unidirectional. It can't just be towards this group of people that come under this label of homeless. We have to consider also the people. If it's just like, they just are too dirty, I don't want them around me, that's not compassion. But if it's like, no, the particular homeless people that we're seeing in our area, they are very, very much not in a right state of mind. They are dangerous, hygienically, all these things. There's something else here, and I don't know what to do with them. I personally don't know what that solution is. But what we can't do is be lacking in compassion towards them, but also for people on the other side of it. It is a dear friend of mine, a lifelong best friend, just said, if somebody would come along that was running for office and said, I have to tell you, I don't know the answer, but I'd love to work with some people to find it, I'd vote for that guy. But everybody's coming in and say, I got an answer. It's toss them over here, or no, it's give them everything. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's just there needs to be some higher process that has to go on, and that doesn't dehumanize these people, but at the same time understands the limitations of them and the possible liabilities involved with them. It is so complex, and I think we just got to pray and really just appeal. I would appeal to your friend on just like, how does compassion work here?
Right.
Could you explain to me how you think compassion would work? Because we have a compassionate God.
Should the church do more? There are people who say, well, the church should take, the churches that are worth all these millions of dollars or whatever, maybe they should start programs. I mean, but again, that wouldn't be the ultimate solution. Even Jesus himself said, the poor you will have with you always. So what then?
Yeah, I mean, that is true. We're going to have the poor with us always. I do feel like if you were to talk to the homeless people, you have a mixture. A lot of them are addicted. Some of them want to be in that lifestyle. Some of them want to be out of it. Mm-hmm. Some of them are just so broken that they mentally look okay, but they're shut down big time. And I don't know the solution at all, but I think it should be on the front of the forecast of every church out there to try to do something about it.
Yeah. All right, we have run out of time. Barbara, Peter, everybody else that we couldn't get to today, really, really sorry that we couldn't, but we will be back tomorrow between 3 and 4 p.m. Pacific time. So give us a call then, won't you? We'd love to hear from you. For Bobby Conway and Richard Cimino, I'm Brian Perez, and Pastor's Perspective was sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa.